Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I'm Marshall Kirkpatrick, your host of the Sprinklr Coffee Club. Thanks so much for joining us. Coffee Club is a show where we talk about social technology, customer experience, digital transformation, the way the world is changing, and what we can all do to be a successful part of those changes. And today I am really excited to have a conversation about a very business-oriented topic, but a conversation about where business and humanity intersect. Can't have one without the other. And our guest today is Mr. Dan Swift, CEO and founder of Empire Selling, a wonderful new training and consulting firm that helps organizations, large and small, learn to bring social skills, empathy, compassion, and digital media savvy to their sales and marketing in order to help grow sales pipeline. Dan was one of a member of the team that helped launch LinkedIn's famous Sales Navigator technology. He then came and was one of the leaders of the sales team here at Sprinklr and is now independent, taking his lessons learned and wisdom all around the world, helping organizations acclimate to the changing environment that we're in and become more valuable actors in it. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm really excited about this conversation, Dan, for a number of different reasons. Social selling is probably the top level tagline that people might think about Empire Selling, but perhaps you can go into a little bit more detail telling us about what the firm does.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, I think a good way to start this would be to share a little bit more on the story, right? So I launched, as you said, LinkedIn Sales Navigator back in 2012, and one of the big things I noticed for the 2.5 or so years that I was with LinkedIn was that a lot of the companies that we were taking that product to really needed help understanding how to leverage LinkedIn as a platform first, and then LinkedIn Sales Navigator as a premium tool. But then there's a whole other host of different things that companies could and should be doing. And as I was working at LinkedIn and then subsequently at Sprinklr, I just realized there was a level of prescriptivity that sales organizations really needed to understand and embed in their day-to-day to really embrace this opportunity, which is back in 2012, maybe a nice channel to embrace, and today an absolutely critical one to embrace. So yeah, social selling, I think, as a term has developed. We call it digital selling because I think to be successful in today's world, you've got to understand all sorts of different social channels and really be active where your customers are. And that might be across a multitude of social channels, as you know well. But that also might be as a seller using tools ranging from Navigator, sure, but to video, all sorts of different things. So yeah, it's a fantastic field to be in, and I'm excited for what the future holds.
That's fantastic. How would you articulate the problem that that you are helping companies solve? What is so hard about embracing digital selling?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think there's the buyer piece, first of all. So there's a lot of talk about how buyers have changed the way they buy and their expectations of salespeople. So I think, first of all, it's teaching B2B organizations and the sales organizations, what buyers want from salespeople today. I think that's one thing. Then I think it's teaching the sellers themselves how to, yes, embrace it as a channel, but also how to embrace it in a very human way. And there's an approach that sellers need to learn how to take, to lead with compassion, to lead with empathy, and to do it in a way that buyers get immediate value from them. So there's a whole, yeah, like I keep saying, prescriptivity. There's a real process behind all of this.
It brings to mind some of the work that Gartner has done recently on the need for what they call buyer enablement. They say that so many B2B firms express trepidation about going into a deal not based on the seller's organizational ability to execute, but based on their own ability to buy and to pull it off across stakeholders and silos and what have you. Is there an opportunity for this kind of digital selling work to make a big impact in terms of buyer enablement?
Oh, for sure, absolutely. So we do a lot of teaching around identifying all the right people in that consensus purchase that you're alluding to, knowing as a seller what content to send and when to different buying personas to achieve the right result. Because you send the wrong content to the wrong person at the wrong time, and it doesn't work well, right? So there's definitely that. There's teaching sellers how to leverage tools like a navigator to understand what's going on within a target account, but also to go then wide and deep into that account. And I always do talk a lot about identifying those economic buyers at the top of the food chain, but also as a seller, identifying the people who will influence that purchasing decision. And then also as a seller, identifying people who can coach you through the sales process. So absolutely, there's tools, but there's also tactical and strategic approaches that you've got to have as well as having that compassion and empathy as well to your approach.
Well, let's start with a conversation about one of the models that you put forward for the individual seller to think about. You have discussed the importance of three things: of networks, content, and profile. What does that mean to you? Perhaps we can start with networks. How should we be thinking about our networks in this new digital era?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I always think about it in terms of putting as much goodness into the world as I possibly can and helping as many people as often as I can with whatever it is that they need help with. And LinkedIn as a platform has afforded people like us who take that kind of approach to really impact as many people's lives as we possibly can. And if we take an approach as salespeople, which is giving rather than asking first, right? We have an opportunity to connect with every single person that we have any form of meaningful business or personal interaction every single day on LinkedIn. So as a seller, you can take that approach and really build your network out pretty quickly. And then the giving piece is the content strategy that you alluded to, right? So salespeople today should be an extension of your corporate brand. And salespeople should know how to educate their networks with the right content at the right time. And we teach at a high level a 50-25-25 rule. So 50% of what we teach salespeople to put out into their networks should be about the organization that employs them. We teach about 25% should be industry thought leadership, so from third-party reputable sources that's going to help your network be more productive and successful in the roles they're in. And then the final 25% is personal content. And that's not pictures of your kids and that sort of stuff, although there is a time and a place for that on LinkedIn. But that's things that you're professionally passionate about. So for me, I do a lot of work elevating women in business, a lot of work with helping veterans transition out of the military into civilian life, and a lot about leading with compassion. So that's the content approach. And then the final pillar you mentioned, profile, and we might want to break it down if you like, but the profile piece is for a seller or anyone for that matter. When you join LinkedIn to get a job or to change jobs, perhaps. And we teach sellers how to stop talking about themselves in that kind of egotistical way. You know, I crushed quota, I went to President's Club, and all those kind of things, which are just a massive turnoff to buyers, and transition them from that resume or that CV to that position of thought leadership where you're actually educating potential buyers on what you as an individual, but also your company could do to help them achieve their goals. So you get that trifecta of profile network content going, then you can be really successful really quickly with LinkedIn as a platform. But let me pause there. That's kind of how we think about it.
That's fantastic. I want to drill into the content part in particular,
Yeah.
and especially the thought leadership content. That paradigm brings to mind the words of John Hagel over at Deloitte. Wonderful, fascinating guy. I'm reading his book right now called The Power of Pull, but he's got a great blog, really good on Twitter. And in The Power of Pull, he says that the role of learning in our professional lives has changed from a model where we stockpile knowledge early in our careers and then go and deploy it throughout various work circumstances to instead being about continuously positioning ourselves to draw from streams of knowledge and learning in an effort to create value. And I wonder, when you are looking for that kind of thought leadership content to share, that 25% non-promotional industry type news, what are some of your favorite sources, or what are some of your favorite approaches to finding good sources, good streams of knowledge to tap into and share?
So I'm going to start with my network. So I look at what my network is sharing every single day as part of my flow. And it's fascinating because a lot of what my network shares, I find fascinating myself. So if I can reshare that with my own 2 cents as to what I got from it and what I think my network would get from it, that's where I always start. And then I've got my go-tos. So I love Harvard Business Review. Absolutely love the content that comes out of there. I read a lot that's published out on Forbes. And then I use some tools. Your sellers who are listening, and others as well. I'm a big fan of Google Alerts still. I still get a lot of great content through there. And then Rebecca Jakarta, a fellow Sprinklr alum, she introduced me to Pocket, which is really cool, right? To get tailored content for what I care about. So, but again, it comes down to there's the sources, and then there's the consuming the content myself, and then there's being selective about what I then push out to my network. I think I think that becomes where the wheels fall off sometimes for salespeople and sales organizations, because there's an element of a lift that you have to do it well. And sometimes salespeople are looking for that instant gratification, right? Whereas this is a slightly longer term play to build a name for yourself in your industry that you can leverage over the medium and longer term.
There is work there, isn't there, in
Yeah.
source selection, in prioritizing, taking the time to do the reading and to read intelligently, to have enough contextual knowledge about the industry to discern between high quality and low quality content. And then in that third step, to share that content with your network in an articulate way that ideally adds additional value even beyond the discovery and the selection.
Yeah, very much so. And bring it back to that kind of that trifecta approach. What's really interesting is if you look like a typical salesperson on LinkedIn, but you have a great content strategy, by sharing all that great content, you bring people to your profile because they're interested to see who shared it. And from an engagement perspective and an inbound lead perspective, that's where it can just end, because the person who's come to your profile looks at you and goes, oh, I was expecting more than that. I won't proactively connect because you look like a typical salesperson. But if you position yourself in the right way, in the way that we teach, that's when people proactively connect more about who you are as an individual.
Dan, how do you advise companies and leaders and individuals regarding the tension between short-term performance pressure and the long-term requirements of social selling and digital selling, this kind of work? I'm brought in my mind to a piece of writing I read recently about the challenges of COVID-19 and how human beings have evolved to be well equipped to deal with a tiger in front of them, somewhat equipped to deal with tiger season. But if there is a long-term change and tigers are more real now than they had been before for an extended period of time, people get tired, they get exhausted, and it's a real challenge. I feel like issues like that come up in this paradigm shift that we're advocating for in moving towards more human, more value-added digital selling. How do you advise your clients to deal with that tension?
So great question. I love that question. So we always start not with social, not with digital, and actually with human beings and how human beings now want to be interacted with, right? Then we layer on the corporate world and the buyer's world and the consensus purchase and committees and how companies buy. Then we layer on modern ways to actually engage with those human beings at those companies in those roles that they're in. So when you break it down like that, that's when the light bulb oftentimes goes off for sales, because salespeople oftentimes, particularly sales leaders, have had their playbooks that have worked for them for 10, 15, 20 years. And they don't work anymore as effectively because a lot of the playbooks involve doing a lot of more traditional, I don't want to say old school, but I'm going to say old school approaches. And that's not what buyers want anymore. So I think there's got to be an element of vulnerability for sales leaders to be okay with the fact that they now need something big. But what's really interesting is we've got companies who, because of the way we do this, a lot of companies are getting incredible short-term wins because with the way we teach, they get all of their salespeople on brand, get all of their people connected internally, get all of their people on doing their content strategy, and then we educate immediately on Sales Navigators. We've got companies literally who walked out of sessions like SAP, Informatica, who are getting like literally hundreds of net new conversations in the hours after trainings. And those bleed straight into net new pipeline and impact all of the business immediately. So I think there's a misconception that I'd just love to address, that social selling is not just having a nice profile and building a network and having a content strategy. It's knowing what actions to take on digital tools and doing it in an incredibly prescriptive way to have an immediate impact on your own book of business and your sales organization and then the company that employs you. So that it's the new world. It really is. It's not just digital or social selling. It's selling. That's what it is now.
I love it. Speaking of how people want to be treated, perhaps we can conclude with a little discussion about the role of emotional intelligence, of compassion, of vulnerability. Those are themes that you discuss frequently. Can you tell us a little bit about what those mean to you and how you relate to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm incredibly passionate about this. So I believe that life is short and we've got to do everything we possibly can to impact the lives of those around us, not just the immediate, friends and family, but people who might be struggling out there. And trust me, a lot of people are struggling just day to day with lots of different things, myself included. So I always take an approach from a sales leadership perspective, really get to know them as human beings, because when you do that and you know what drives them and what they're passionate about and what they care about and what is going to motivate them and be there for them, like if you genuinely show up for them, they will support you 10x when you need them. So I always really want to understand who those people are, and that's not something you can just do overnight as a leader. That involves you genuinely and passionately caring about the people around you. I mentioned being vulnerable. I think that's one of the things that sales leaders struggle with the most, because for some reason there's this bravado that's been built up over the years, and people don't want to show vulnerability. They don't want to show that they actually don't have all the answers. And I've seen so often sales leaders come into companies with their playbooks that have worked for them and tried to roll them out, and they haven't worked because they haven't taken the time to slow down and ask questions of the people who have been there for years. To say, well, why have we done things that way? What was the reason for it? What was the rationale? What are you seeing before they kind of roll out those playbooks, or not, as the case may be? I think that sales leaders have to walk in the shoes of the sellers themselves to really genuinely and compassionately lead a team. Because as a sales leader, if you haven't actually tried to sell something at that company, if you haven't tried to deal with one of those inbound customer complaints, if you haven't tried to process an order in a CRM or anything like that at all, you really can't be compassionate to the people that are doing that day to day for you. I believe so passionately that your role as a sales leader is actually somewhat of a counselor as well, because sales is up and down, right? Roller coaster. And you have to be there for your people when sometimes they just want to call you up, and I almost swore then, and just talk to you about what's going on. And that's okay. And you should be there for them, because ultimately, again, if you are, they will run through doors for you. And then the final thing, and then I'll pause. You can tell I'm passionate, right? Is the last one is you've got to be compassionate to yourself too. So it's all very well being there for everyone else, and that's what I work on continually, because I don't do and haven't done traditionally and historically a good job at looking after myself and health and fitness and everything, because I put so much energy and time into other people, and literally it's something I'm focused on right now is looking out for myself as well.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear and well articulated. Dan, this has been an inspiring and provocative conversation. I'm really excited to get to speak with some of my coworkers in our network to hear what they think about it. And I'm so glad that we were able to connect today.
Me too. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You bet, Dan. What's the best way? Where would you recommend that people connect with you to continue learning from your work?
I think there's a couple of things. So definitely empireselling.com. But I would also have them, connect with me on LinkedIn. We, obviously I've got a content strategy, as I hope you'd expect. And I think they will find, if some of the things that we share commonality wise, I think they'll find my content, helpful for them. Fingers crossed.
I have so far, and again today. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us here on the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I hope you'll join us next week as well. Dan, thanks again. Have a great day out there. Take care.